The dining room had gone so still you could hear silverware settle. Not a soul moved. Not the hostess, not the couple at table 5 who'd been laughing seconds ago, not even the pianist whose hands now hovered above the keys in midair. He stood from his chair, red in the face, napkin crushed in his fist like it had wronged him. "Is this what passes for service in this place?" he barked, his voice booming off marble and brass. "You're incompetent. Maybe try a job you're actually suited for." She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't shrink. The black waitress stood her ground, shoulders back, hands still at her sides. She blinked once, then came her reply. One sentence, and that sentence, short, calm, sharp, hit the billionaire like a brick through glass. His face slackened, his mouth opened, but nothing came out. 2 of his guests stiffened. One slowly reached for her wine, the other muttered, "Wait, what did she just say?" The manager's pen fell from behind his ear. Someone at the bar gasped, and across the dining room, a waiter mouthed, "Oh my God." Because in that moment, no one was thinking about steak or Pinot Noir or dessert. They were staring at her. All of them. And what she had just said flipped the entire room on its axis. "Stick around." What she told him wasn't just a clapback. It was a quiet reveal no one saw coming. Make sure you subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ and drop a comment telling us what country you're watching from. Claymores wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where hedge fund executives came to order $100 steaks medium rare and pretend to care about art. Where waitlists stretched into months and gratuity was automatically included because people like them didn't tip unless they had to. The chandeliers were low and golden. The music was just loud enough to suggest taste, not enjoyment. And the staff, meant to be efficient, forgettable, silent. Lana James knew the rules. She'd been working the floor of Claymores for 2 years, 6 days a week, double shifts if needed, and never ever speak unless spoken to. Smile, refill, step away. She wasn't there to make friends or play charming. She was there to send money home to her grandmother and keep a roof over both their heads. But tonight was different. From the second she saw his name on the reservation list, something curled in her chest. Gregory Langston. The name came with a weight, a reputation. His face had been on the front page of every major finance magazine. He'd founded the tech empire that ran half the cloud storage in the country, worth over $4.6 billion last time Forbes whispered about him. The man had power, and he wore it like a weapon. He was seated at table 9, the largest in her section. 3 other guests joined him. They all wore wealth like it was skin deep, watches that cost more than rent, rings too heavy for casual gestures. Lana greeted them with a polite nod, the same one she gave to every guest. But something in his eyes lingered a bit too long. She introduced herself softly, offered water, made eye contact just once, and that's when it started. "I asked for sparkling, not still," Gregory snapped without even looking up from his phone. "It is sparkling, sir," Lana replied. He sipped, then set the glass down slowly. "Next time, don't argue, just fix it." The others chuckled awkwardly. One glanced at Lana, then quickly away. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, face blank, fists clenched behind her apron. She'd seen this routine before. Men like him didn't want service. They wanted submission. Later came the first course. She laid down each plate with grace, naming the dishes. When she reached for Gregory's, he spoke loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Let me guess, you had to rehearse that in the mirror, didn't you?" A pause. Not long, just enough for the sting to settle. But she stayed quiet. She always did. Because in this place, dignity often had to dress itself up as silence. But when he mispronounced her name deliberately the 3rd time, Lana, honestly, do any of you have normal names anymore? The buzz in the dining room shifted. A few heads turned. One server behind the bar froze mid-pour. Still, she held it together. She always did, until the whiskey. She brought it neat, just as the ticket read. He took one look, squinted. "You forgot the ice. Are you this bad at following instructions, or is this just a performance?" Lana's hands didn't shake, but inside something cracked. She placed the glass down slowly, 1 inch from his hand, looked him in the eye and said nothing. Not yet. She turned to retrieve the ice, but by then he had already stood. Red-faced, loud. And when he called her incompetent and slammed his napkin, the room went silent. What Lana said next would turn more than just a few heads. It would pull a memory from Gregory's past, one he wasn't ready to face. And it was only 7 words. The napkin still lay crumpled at the edge of the table, damp with frustration and arrogance. Gregory Langston remained standing, towering over Lana, expecting her to wither under the heat of his words. He was used to people folding, especially people who looked like her. But Lana didn't blink. She didn't apologize. She didn't stammer or step back. She just looked at him and said, calm as water, "Your daughter used to cry in my dorm room when you missed visiting day." 7 words. That's all. Gregory froze. His posture faltered just slightly. A few beats passed before the weight of her sentence registered. His brow furrowed as though replaying her words in his mind, each one hitting like a quiet echo from a part of his life he had long buried. The room held its breath. No fork moved. No conversation resumed. The only sound came from the kitchen door swinging silently behind another waiter who stopped in his tracks mid-step. One of Gregory's dinner companions turned toward him, eyes narrowed. Wait, what did she just say? His wife, his second wife, sat rigidly, hand resting lightly on her designer clutch, now gripped just a little tighter. Her wine glass remained untouched. Gregory tried to speak, but what came out wasn't anger. It was confusion. What do you mean? Lana didn't answer. She didn't owe him an explanation. She'd said enough. She turned and walked away. Slow, steady steps. Her apron didn't flutter. Her shoulders didn't drop. She placed the ice bowl on the bar, calmly picked up a towel, and wiped her hands. In the dining room, whispers bloomed like wildfire. She knows his daughter? Did she just expose something? How does she? No one raised their voice. They didn't have to. The atmosphere had changed completely. It wasn't just about a billionaire yelling at a waitress anymore. Now, the question was, who exactly was she? And what did she know? Back at table 9, Gregory finally sat down. Slowly. He didn't pick up the whiskey. He didn't touch his steak. He looked at the wood grain in the table as if searching for a crack he could disappear into. Because now the mask was slipping. And Lana? She moved through her section as though nothing had happened. She delivered water to table 3. Refilled coffee at table 7. Smiled, gently, reserved the way she always had. But under the surface, her pulse beat steady. Because she hadn't planned to say it. Not really. But the moment the insult left his mouth, the way he weaponized his wealth, the way his voice wrapped around the word incompetent like it was a leash, something inside her refused to shrink. She had kept her head down for too long, watched too many like him use their status like a club. But tonight, she remembered the girl who used to sit on their dorm floor crying about how her father cared more about the optics of parenting than the act of showing up. Emily Langston. Soft voice, messy notebooks, heart always somewhere between art and survival. They had shared instant noodles, cried over finals, studied in the library until morning. Lana had held her hair back after panic attacks, hidden bruises, emotional ones. And every semester, Emily would check the mailbox twice as much as everyone else on visiting weekends, just in case. But he never came. He never wrote. He never cared, at least not enough to be present. And now that same man had the gall to humiliate her in front of strangers? He didn't recognize her, but she remembered every painful detail of what his absence had done to Emily. So no, Lana wasn't just a waitress. She was a witness. And tonight, her silence had expired. Back at the bar, the restaurant manager approached slowly, voice low. "Lana, you okay?" She nodded once. "Fine. Do you want to take a break?" She looked up, caught Gregory watching her, something unreadable on his face. Not rage, not guilt, something else. Maybe recognition, maybe shame. "I'm fine," she said again. Service isn't over. Because she hadn't broken any rule. She hadn't yelled, cursed, or thrown anything. All she did was speak the truth. And that truth was finally out. She didn't know the video had already started circulating, or that someone at table 6 had recorded everything, starting right from the napkin slam. By morning, she'd be everywhere. But for now, she kept clearing plates. Because dignity doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just tells the truth, right to your face. By the time Lana returned from her break, the table had cleared out. Gregory was gone. No angry scene, no confrontation, just vanished like a stain scrubbed too hard. But that silence, it was louder than anything he'd said. The restaurant manager avoided eye contact, though his expression said more than he intended. The chef gave her a slight nod. One of the bartenders left her a can of ginger ale and a note that said simply, "Respect." But Lana didn't care about the whispers or the glances or the calls that had already begun to roll in from corporate. Her hands moved by muscle memory, but her mind had gone back, not just to Emily, but to everything that led to that moment, and why she had said what she did. Freshman year. A dorm with peeling white walls and a heater that clanked in protest every winter night. Emily Langston had shown up late, dragging 2 suitcases and an energy that screamed overcompensation. Wealthy on paper, guarded in person. No one knew she was Gregory Langston's daughter at first. She didn't talk about him. Lana only found out when a finance professor slipped up during a lecture. "Of course you wouldn't have to worry about scholarships, Miss Langston." Later that night, Emily confessed, "He sends tuition, but that's all. He doesn't return calls. Not unless it's about PR. I'm a press release, not a daughter." That broke something in Lana, because despite their differences, race, class, upbringing, they both knew what it felt like to be pushed to the edge of visibility. For different reasons, yes, but the ache was familiar. They became inseparable for 2 years. Emily even stayed with Lana's family over one Thanksgiving break. Lana's grandmother made stew and called her skinny little city ghost while loading her plate. For the first time, Emily felt seen. But by junior year, things started to change. Emily's depression deepened. Her calls became fewer. She was drinking more, skipping class. The final straw came when she said she was dropping her economics major to pursue visual arts. Her father found out and cut her off, instantly. "I'm a disgrace," she texted. Said I'd be nothing without his name. Maybe he's right. Lana never believed that, but Emily disappeared shortly after, transferred. No goodbye. The last time Lana heard from her, it was an email from a new account. No subject line. Just 2 lines. "Thank you for being my only home when I had none. Don't let this place shrink you." Then silence. And now, years later, that man, the man who'd humiliated his own daughter for choosing herself, was the same man screaming at her in a restaurant like she was subhuman. He didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. To him, she was just another black face in a service apron. Another voice he could flatten with a well-timed insult. He hadn't changed. But Lana had. She'd spent years biting her tongue, watching guests like him flirt with disrespect like it was a cocktail. She'd endured the side eyes, the jokes said just loud enough, the hands that reached where they shouldn't, and the constant assumption that she was replaceable. But she wasn't. Not then. Not now. That sentence she delivered at the table? It wasn't revenge. It was memory brought back to life. Not to hurt him, but to remind him. Because in his world, people like her didn't have names or stories. They were bodies moving between tables. But Lana wasn't there to be invisible. She was there to tell the truth. And she had told it. And while Gregory Langston may have walked out the front door without a word, his silence screamed louder than anything else in the room. It wouldn't take long for the world outside those walls to start asking questions. And the first one would be, who is Lana James? By sunrise, Lana's shift was over. The city had quieted into its usual early morning hush, and she stepped out into the cold with her coat zipped halfway and her phone buzzing uncontrollably in her pocket. 32 missed messages, 17 unread emails, 2 voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize. She hadn't even checked social media yet. But by the time she got to the bus stop, her cousin Amira had already sent the link. "Girl, you went viral. Like, nationwide viral." At first, Lana thought it was an exaggeration. Maybe a tweet. Maybe someone posted about the confrontation at Claymores. But it wasn't just a tweet. It was the video. Crisp, centered, captured by a diner 2 tables away who hadn't even meant to record. It was originally meant for a foodie blog. In less than 10 hours, it had racked up over 2 million views. No commentary, no edits. Just raw footage of a black waitress being berated by a billionaire and delivering 7 words that brought everything to a standstill. "Your daughter used to cry in my dorm room when you missed visiting day." That was the clip. People paused, rewound, quoted it. Memes began to surface, but most weren't mocking. Most were reverent. She didn't raise her voice, she raised a mirror. "I want to be that composed under pressure." She reminded him who he was. Comments flowed in fast. "This is the most elegant takedown I've seen in a long time." The fact that he said what he did, in front of everyone and still felt entitled to dignity? Black women do not get paid enough for what they deal with. And then came the other wave. Screenshots of Gregory Langston's face. Old articles resurfacing about workplace discrimination lawsuits quietly settled by his company. Interviews where he'd referred to diversity hires as a corporate burden. One clip from 5 years ago where he said, laughing, "I don't even talk to my own kids unless my assistant reminds me it's their birthday." This wasn't just an isolated incident anymore. It was a pattern. Former employees from his tech firm began posting anonymously stories of mistreatment, underpayment, racial gaslighting, HR reports that mysteriously vanished. A few brave ones put their names to it. One woman wrote, "He once asked me if I spoke Hood fluently because my last name was Johnson." It didn't take long before journalists picked up the scent. By noon, Gregory Langston was trending on X, Instagram, YouTube, and even LinkedIn. Headlines didn't pull punches. Billionaire exposed by waitress in viral video. 7 words that rocked the tech world. Gregory Langston's public meltdown raises deeper questions. Claymores restaurant tried to stay out of it. They issued a generic statement about respecting all patrons and staff equally, but commenters weren't buying it. Screenshots emerged of reviews alleging past racially motivated mistreatment from other black staffers. Then quietly came a message request on Lana's Instagram. A verified account. Emily Langston. Lana stared at the name for a full minute. She hadn't seen or heard from Emily in almost 5 years. Her profile photo was soft, her holding a baby. The message was short, shaky. "I saw the video. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were working there. I have so many things I want to say. I don't know where to start." Lana didn't reply. Not yet. Her heart was doing too many things at once. But that message was real. That baby was real. And so was the silence between them that had stretched over years. But now, the world was watching. Not just for drama, but for reckoning. This wasn't about a rich man being rude at a restaurant. It was about how easily someone like Lana could be spoken over, dismissed, humiliated, until she spoke back. And how that one moment exposed an entire structure beneath it. News anchors debated whether Gregory Langston should issue a public apology. Business reporters tracked how his company's stock began to slip. A podcast aired an emergency episode titled "When the Help Has Receipts." Lana's name had been kept out of the original video, but the internet moved fast. By now, she was receiving offers, interview requests, speaking engagements, even a book proposal. A popular talk show's producer emailed her directly, but she hadn't responded to any of it, because this wasn't a performance for her. This was her real life, and it didn't feel empowering yet. It felt overwhelming. She was just trying to protect her grandmother, keep her rent paid, and stay out of headlines. But headlines had found her anyway, and somewhere Gregory Langston, billionaire tech mogul, absentee father, self-appointed king of Manhattan, was watching the world finally hold up a mirror. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't like what he saw. By the 3rd day, the pressure on Gregory Langston's empire began to show in the one place he cared about most, his balance sheet. At 9:13 a.m., 3 major outlets confirmed what insiders had already suspected. A multinational client had paused their $280 million contract with Langston Data Systems. Not canceled, just paused. But in the stock market, a pause is blood in the water. Shares dropped 4% before noon. By close of business, it was 9%. It wasn't just about the numbers. Investors were nervous, the board silent, PR scrambling. Langston himself? Nowhere to be found. For a man who once live-streamed earnings calls from his penthouse and posted motivational rants about resilience and vision, the silence was jarring. But behind closed doors, he was doing what powerful men often do when cornered. He blamed the backlash on the culture of overreaction. He told his legal team to find anything in Lana's history they could twist. Social posts, complaints, even an old parking ticket if necessary. But there was nothing to dig up. Lana's life wasn't messy. Just modest, focused, tired maybe, but clean. The irony? He didn't even remember her name, even after everything. "She's some activist waitress now?" he muttered in a closed meeting. "You'd think I slapped her." The room went quiet, because someone in that room, a black woman from HR, had watched the video 10 times. She had worked at Langston's company for 8 years, knew how many times she'd been passed over, talked down to, sidelined. She cleared her throat. She didn't have to be slapped. We all felt it. Langston stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Because, to men like him, power wasn't something you wielded with care. It was something you used and expected others to respect you for using. Humility wasn't in his vocabulary, accountability even less so. But the world outside was changing. Several prominent black leaders issued statements online, citing Lana's composure and the deeper conversation her story triggered. Celebrities reposted the video. Activists connected it to a long-standing pattern of black women being publicly disrespected in service roles, especially when they refused to play submissive. Hashtags spread. Lana was Grace, invisible until she spoke, Billionaire exposed. And every hour, new stories emerged. A former Langston data engineer described how Gregory used to joke during team meetings. Just give the DEI people something shiny and they'll stop complaining. Another ex-employee shared, "He once told me I should smile more if I want to be taken seriously. I was 7 months pregnant." The man wasn't just rude. He was entitled. And that entitlement had been camouflaged as leadership for too long. Back in Lana's neighborhood, she tried to keep her head down. She still took the subway, still bought groceries from the corner store, still fed her grandmother lunch while pretending everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Because even though she hadn't spoken publicly, her silence had become symbolic. Her refusal to engage was seen not as avoidance, but as strength. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't threatened, she hadn't posted a monologue or filmed a tearful video. She had looked a billionaire in the eye and said something real. And he didn't know what to do with that. So now, the world was watching how he'd respond. And Gregory Langston, for the first time in his life, had no script. At first, Lana tried to return to normal. She clocked in 2 minutes early, tied her apron tight, and wiped the same table 3 times just to keep her hands busy. But Claymores had changed. The air had shifted. Guests whispered when she passed. Some offered awkward smiles, others glanced quickly away. By day 5, the general manager pulled her aside with a tight smile. "We're just trying to reduce attention right now. Maybe consider the prep station for a while?" She nodded. But in the walk-in fridge, she cried. Not because she'd been demoted. She was used to the quiet retaliation dressed up as policy. What stung was the reminder that dignity always had to be earned, twice over, if you were black, and 3 times if you were black and a woman. Still, she didn't speak out. She didn't rush to platforms or stage a press conference. She wasn't chasing fame. That wasn't the plan. But the plan had changed. Because as Gregory Langston's empire cracked, more people stepped forward. Not for clout, but for clarity. An email thread from 2018 leaked, Gregory mocking a junior black employee's name, calling it unpronounceable on purpose. A video surfaced from an internal event where he referred to DEI programs as corporate theater. An old podcast reemerged where he laughed about a waitress with attitude, who thought she was special because she read books. It wasn't confirmed, but many speculated it was Lana. And then came the report. Langston Data Systems had been quietly investigated by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for racial bias in promotions. The dots connected themselves. In the midst of it all, Lana received another message from Emily. "He doesn't deserve your silence. Let me know if you want me to speak too." This time, Lana replied, "You already did. You showed up, for once. That's enough." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't closure, but it was real, and it gave Lana the clarity she needed. So when the producer from the Journal Weekly called again, Lana finally answered. Not to attack, not to gloat, to speak the truth. She didn't talk about being a hero, she talked about being tired, about how black women are expected to bear disrespect like it's part of the job description, about how invisible labor becomes emotional bruising over time, about how one man yelling in public wasn't unique, but how rare it was for someone to reply. Her words weren't rehearsed, they were raw. He thought he was correcting me, but really, he was correcting a world he thought owed him comfort. And I stopped playing along. The interview aired within hours. Clips trended. One in particular exploded. "They say we're angry when we're firm. They say we're rude when we refuse to bow. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't rude. I was done." That line hit a nerve. Over the next 24 hours, at least 15 black women posted videos under the hashtag #IWasDoneToo, each sharing their own version of the moment they finally stopped tolerating disrespect in silence. Lana didn't watch them all. She couldn't. But she saw enough to know. This was no longer about Gregory Langston. It never was. He had become a symbol. A stand-in for every man who'd smirked while demeaning someone, for every executive who used a title as armor, for every dinner guest who assumed the black woman bringing the food had no story of her own. And Lana, she was never trying to be a story. But now that she was going to tell it right. No embellishments, no dramatics, just a calm voice and the truth. Because when the world finally listened, not to a shout but to a sentence, it shook something loose. Not just in Gregory Langston's firm, but in every room where people like him expected obedience, not presence. And now, those rooms were no longer quiet. By the end of the week, a formal statement from Langston Data Systems finally dropped. 4 paragraphs of vague language, passive phrasing, and legal padding. We are committed to diversity and inclusion. We regret any misunderstandings that may have occurred during the incident in question. The views expressed by our founder do not reflect our core values. Nowhere in that statement was Lana's name. Nowhere in it was accountability. Instead, it read like a corporate reflex, an attempt to patch a leaking pipe with expensive spin. But the public had learned to recognize this kind of language. The comments flooded in. You're sorry it went viral, not that it happened. Misunderstanding? The whole world understood it clearly. Diversity isn't a PR line, it's how you treat people when no one's recording. Meanwhile, investors weren't satisfied. A major European partner suspended operations. Tech blogs reported that Langston Data's pipeline for upcoming projects had stalled, and one of its board members, the only black woman on it, resigned publicly. Lana watched it all unfold from the same bus stop she used every morning. No security, no cameras, just a quiet presence in a loud storm. And when asked if she had any message for Gregory Langston or his company, her response was short. No, I already said what I needed to say. Because Lana understood something they didn't. Dignity doesn't beg for acknowledgement. She didn't need their apology. She needed change. And it was happening, not just in headlines, but in conversations. Between managers and staff, HR departments and executives, friends at coffee shops who finally saw the layers in that one video. Meanwhile, Claymores continued to shift. The kitchen staff, mostly immigrants and people of color, looked at Lana differently now. Not with awe, but with a kind of relief. Like she had done something they'd always wished they could. Even the sommelier, a quiet man from Brazil, whispered to her one night as they cleaned the cutlery, "You didn't raise your voice. And yet we all heard you." Not everyone was supportive. One patron left a note on a receipt that read, "You should have stayed quiet. Now you're just another angry black girl with a following." She smiled when she read it, because he was wrong twice. She wasn't angry. And she wasn't just anything. She was a woman who remembered, who witnessed, who chose a moment, not to retaliate, but to respond. And her response didn't require volume or vengeance, just clarity and truth. In an age where people screamed to be heard, she whispered, and the world leaned in. And in a country where black women are too often expected to endure, to accommodate, to swallow every slight, Lana had done the radical thing. She answered back, and then she went back to work. Because this was never about becoming famous, it was about being seen. And now, finally, she was. The weeks passed, but the conversation didn't die down. In fact, it grew. It wasn't about Lana anymore, not entirely. It was about what her silence had disrupted, what her 7 words had illuminated. For every viral tweet and headline, there were private emails, quiet messages, handwritten notes from flight attendants, baristas, nurses, janitors, receptionists, students, mothers, lawyers, women, black women. Many wrote to say they'd never seen someone like themselves hold that kind of composure, that kind of space in such an unequal room. Some told her their own moments when they wanted to speak but feared losing their jobs, their reputation, their safety. One message stood out. You didn't yell, and still, the whole world heard you. Thank you for reminding me that we don't have to perform rage to be powerful. Lana read that one twice. It came from a teacher in Mississippi. She responded with just 2 words, "I see you." Claymores offered her a promotion, not just a raise but a fast track into management. she declined. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. Because what she wanted didn't exist in that building. A week later, she made a choice, quietly, without a press release. She left the job and began something new. With the help of a local community grant and a small donation from a Black-owned law firm that had followed her story, Lana launched a workshop series called She Speaks First, a program for young Black women navigating hostile workplaces. No big budget, no sponsorships, just folding chairs, shared stories, and honesty. It wasn't about teaching them how to endure disrespect. It was about helping them name it and respond when the moment called. And whether she stood before 5 girls or 50, she began every session the same way. I didn't plan to be brave. I just stopped being afraid of being too Black to deserve respect. That line became a mural, painted by an anonymous artist on the side of a deli in Harlem. Black and white image of Lana, eyes forward, apron on, standing, not smiling, not frowning, just present. Beneath it in red paint, she didn't flinch. Gregory Langston? He faded quietly. His board forced him into early retirement. His firm was absorbed by a competitor 6 months later. His name became a cautionary tale in corporate seminars on bias and image. And no, he never apologized, but he never spoke her name again either. And that, in a way, was its own kind of confession. As for Lana, she never asked to be a symbol. She never raised her voice. She simply stood, told the truth, and walked away. And in doing so, she reminded a country long used to looking past women like her. That grace is not weakness. That silence is not agreement. And that dignity, it doesn't beg, it declares. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ for more true stories that challenge injustice and celebrate resilience. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because voices like Lana's deserve to be heard in every corner of the world.